I was asked recently by a viewer to cover the subject of composition. But because these videos are Photoshop based, let's look at composition from an editing point of view. The rule of thirds is the one that most amateur photographers are familiar with, and we see this grid every time we crop an image. The rule of thirds composition divides our frame into a 3x3 grid, and we place key parts of our image along the lines or at the places where they intersect. It helps create a balanced and usually a visually more appealing composition. Now, this way of composing our images works pretty well for the vast majority of our photography. It helps us create a balanced and visually appealing image. There are other ways to compose our images, but if you're new to composition principles, stay with the rule of thirds because it's very easy to remember and understand. As our photographic experience improves, so does our composition skills. But it's worth looking at what they are and how we find help with them in both Photoshop and Adobe Camera Raw. Let's take Photoshop first. When we open up an image into Photoshop and we select the crop tool, we see the bounding box here, but if I click inside it, we instantly see the rule of thirds. We can come away from this at any time by touching the escape key. But if I were to select the crop and I just wanted to crop the head of this bird for some particular project, I can just click and drag within that shape and just select the part that I want, hit the enter key, and we've got it selected. On this occasion though, I'm going to hit Ctrl Z to undo that. Because if we pick up that crop tool and we click inside to see the rule of thirds, I want to draw your attention to the options at the top of the screen, and the main option is this one here. This option will show us a number of other compositional rules, but they're quite tricky to view from the menu above. But if you look down this panel, you can see we can cycle through them using the O key on the keyboard, and that's what I intend to do here. So as I scroll through that O key, we can see the other options. This one I don't think has a great deal of interest, but here we're moving on to one called diagonal. Now, the compositional principles remain the same. We want to put important parts of our image on the lines and where they cross. If you look at this image, you can see that the angle of the bird's head is nicely on that diagonal line, and the body too. And of course the eye and the beak, the whole head, very close to where those two lines cross. So it's quite a strong composition there. Now as I tap that O key again, we move on to the triangle, and here you can see that is also working reasonably well with this image, where we've got the angle of the beak and the head running along that line on the right, and of course the whole angle of the animal going from the left corner to the top. So it's working quite well with this compositional rule. Touching the O key again, we come to the golden ratio, very similar to the rule of thirds, and once again all the same principles apply. And finally we have the golden spiral. Now this spiral is a great guide for placing elements in our images in a way that draws the viewer's attention through the image. Some photographers use it to lead the viewer's eye towards a focal point. I'm not suggesting this image is perfect, but we do have a number of varieties of this because of course it can be flipped. If we want to view those, hold the Shift key and touch the O key, and you can see the other variations. And now maybe we do have that sort of shape running around from the back of the bird all the way around to the eye. But if I touch it again, you can see it will change every time. Touch the O again and we're back to the start of the list, which is our rule of thirds. Now, with an image opened up into Adobe Camera Raw, as you can see here, I've already cropped quite a small part of the whole image. You can see the rest of the image ghosted on the right and below. But I've composed this using the rule of thirds, so we've got the top line almost on the horizon of that darker water, a good position for the bottom line, a nice diagonal of the water coming through the frame, and of course the surfer in the right position moving into the picture. But if we touch the O key here, it doesn't do anything with our compositional rules at all. It in fact turns on the highlight warning. But what we can do is right click within the crop bounding box. Now when I do that, we've got quite a number of options here, but let me take you straight down to the bottom. Overlay style, and now we see the same sort of thing we saw in Photoshop. And once again, we can cycle through them, which is far easier and quicker to do, but we do need to use Alt-V. So let's do that in Adobe Camera Raw. Alt-V. Alt-V, and we get a straight grid. Not a great deal of use to us while we're composing, so I'm going to move on. Alt-V again. There we can see the diagonal we was looking at previously, and we can see here that it fits quite well with this image. And again, here we have a center, and I'm not entirely sure that I can speak clearly about that. I've never used it, I have to admit. So I'm going to move on to Alt-V once again, and that takes us to the triangle, the golden ratio, and then of course to the golden spiral. So once we've reached the golden spiral, we've used Alt-V to cycle through them. What we need to do to look at the different aspects of the golden spiral is to hold the Shift key and hit the V key. And then we see exactly the same options that we saw in Photoshop a few moments ago. So Photoshop and Adobe Camera Raw does give us the guidance and the help we need to review our compositional rules. A good idea is to write some of these shortcuts down and tack them to the side of your monitor. I found that's a great way to learn them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.